Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Laura Kirwan, who is a new urban fantasy author, and she's going to be talking about some of the challenges that you face when you just have your first book out, publishing right now here in 2014. And before she turned to writing, she was a lawyer, so we decided we're actually going to ask her some questions on, she actually knows about IP law, I think it's called, the fancy term for what authors would be interested in. And, in future shows, we'll always talk about the marketing stuff, but if we have somebody that's an expert on something, we'll do a little bit of that too. So we'll be covering both tonight. And Laura, why don't you tell us a bit about the law stuff and why you decided to become a writer instead?
A little bit about the law stuff. There's a reason that lawyers get paid as well as they do, because they have to be, or no one would do the job. I used to joke that the worst part of being a lawyer was working with other lawyers. I always wanted to write, and it ended up in law school instead of getting a Master's of Fine Art in English, which actually turned out to be a much better choice at this point in my life, and just never thought it was possible. I had student loans, I had to support myself, and I had this career, and I'd work at the computer all day for 8-9 hours, and then to come home and write for 2-3 more hours just was undoable, and it just seemed so overwhelming. And then I started learning a little bit about self-publishing, and then I met you, Lindsay, at that dinner party, and that's kind of where we went. I was started right there. I knew this was the way for me to go. So I moved down to Arizona about 3 years ago. Was going to start another career. I had a little midlife crisis sojourn as a massage therapist. Don't ask, it's over. Something I always wanted to do. I did it. It was fun. I'm not doing it anymore. Anyway, but I came down thinking I was gonna do that, and then I decided, no, I really do want to be an attorney again now that I'm not quite so burnt out from my municipal law career. I worked in local government, and oh god, very stressful. And so started a law practice. Tried to start a law practice working with authors, and then got the license, got my Arizona license in place. Did a little bit and then thought, why am I creating a second day job? At the time I'm still living with my dad, and what had started out as sort of an informal living situation until I got settled, and then him enjoying having getting to spend time with me turned into me needing to take care of him. So anyway, that's kind of how I ended up doing this. I thought, I'm never going to get an opportunity like this again, and I'm going to go for it. And so I talked to my dad. I'm like, are you okay with this? And he said, yeah, I'm fine. That's not a problem. So here I am. So it's much, much, much more fun than being a lawyer, I have to tell you. I was a transactional attorney, so I pretty much sat at the computer and wrote every day for hours and hours and hours. So that turned out to be really good preparation. And also it's really helped me enormously on the business side of things. I'm kind of starting like several steps ahead of most new writers because I understand the business piece of it a lot better. It's a lot easier for me to learn it because I knew a lot of the foundational stuff in terms of contracts and things. So you want to ask me about contracts, I think.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your first book before we get jumping into law stuff?
My first book is it's called Impervious. I don't know if you can see it there. It's the first book in the City of Eldritch urban fantasy series, and it's about a woman, oddly enough, about 50 years old, an attorney, a municipal attorney, imagine that, who has to move from Arizona back to Pennsylvania to help take care of her father who has Alzheimer's. Her first day on the job, she takes over his job as the city attorney for this tiny little town, and first day on the job discovers that she's impervious to magic, that magic is in fact real, but it doesn't affect her, and that she's in this town that's surrounded by these magical gateways, and she has this destiny, basically. She has to take over her dad's job as a sort of a negotiator of magical conflicts, but more importantly as kind of the gatekeeper of the human world. So that's the first book, and it's all about her kind of figuring that out, and the series is gonna go through, I'm planning on 7 books. So far, my ideas have not been abandoning me, and I've already got I'm starting to think of book 3. Book 2 is like this close to coming out, and book 4 is kind of starting to gel a little bit, and we'll see what happens with 5, 6, and 7. Because I don't know what they're about yet. So, anyway, but yeah, it's a grumpy old, middle-aged attorney who's approaching magic with that sort of very logical, rational, bullshit detector mode. So it's kind of it's funny. It's funny in spots, but it's also serious in spots. So anyway, that's the book.
All right, sounds great, and I hope people will check it out, and I definitely want to ask you some more about marketing it here at the end. But yes, we have to grill you on the law questions. And because I'm such a great introducer, it being my first time, I forgot to mention that Joe Lalo is here on the show with me. Say hi, Joe.
Hey, I'm down here.
And he's going to help me with the questions. And Jeffrey Poole is off on vacation this week, so he'll be back next week. But so I thought I'd just start out first with the question that every new writer seems to have at some point in their career before they get published: is, do you need to file for copyright? And if not, what's involved with all that?
Do you need to mail yourself a copy of your manuscript and jump up and down and turn in a circle 3 times saying, I have a copyright, I have a copyright, I have a copyright? It's amazing the kind of myths and legends that are associated to this day with copyright. Basically, copyright, you have a copyright in the work when you write it. The moment you put those words on the page, you own the copyright. When people talk about filing for copyright, it's not that you have to file to get a copyright in your work. What they're really talking about is registering your copyright with the Federal Copyright Office and Library of Congress. And so none of this is, it used to be under, this is where the confusion comes about, under the old version of the Act, pre-1976, I think, it was very technical, and if you didn't, if you didn't file at this point, you'd lose it, and if you didn't use a copyright symbol, you'd lose it, and there were all sorts of things. Now they took all of that out, tried to make it much less technical, much easier to manage. So when they talk about filing a copyright, like I said, it's registering your copyright. And basically you go onto the copyright.gov website, and it's I can't remember the name. It's not e-file, that's the feds, but it's e-something or other. E-register or something like that. But it's pretty straightforward. It's $35. You go through that process, and then to complete it, you need to mail 2 books, 2 of the best copies. If you just have digital, you can just send them a digital file. If you have paper books, you mail them the paper books to the Library of Congress. It's not a fast process on their end. I did this several months ago, and I'm still waiting. I finally sent them an email to say, hey, did something go wrong? And they're like, oh, no, we're working on our process. The reason why you want to register, and there's no requirement, there's no legal requirement to register. If you just never get around to it, and I had my book out for several months before I did, you're not going to lose the copyright. Where it becomes important is when you're in issues of copyright infringement. So, for instance, you want to sue someone for copyright infringement. Someone's, printed up. At the instance, I don't know if you heard about this. There was a romance novelist who had written a very kind of, sweet romance, and another author had taken that book, thrown in some smutty sex scenes, changed very little, changed a couple names, and then marketed it as her own. So
this is 50 Shades of Grey, right?
No. This is actually 2 women in Utah. Big, ugly thing. So the first author who was ripped off is suing for copyright infringement. Anyway, but it doesn't happen that often. I mean, it's not. I know people are terrified. I always run to people like, how do I copyright my manuscript? How do I copyright my idea? Well, you can't. You can't copyright ideas. But anyway, so if you register, though, what it does for you is it gives you, it counts, where it's critical in copyright infringement is proving that you have the copyright. Yes, you have the copyright, but you need to prove when you had it. And if you can prove that you have it, just because you wrote the book, you can pull up old computer files, and but it's slower and it's more cumbersome. If you register, at the time of publication or up to a certain amount of time before you sue for copyright infringement, you get statutory damages. And it's been a while I looked at it, so take all this with a grain of salt. And that reminds me, I didn't give my let me back up. Let me give you my disclaimer real quick here. I am not currently licensed to practice law. Everything I'm telling you here is informational. This is not legal advice. This does not constitute legal advice. For specific legal questions, you need to consult a licensed attorney. And I am not forming an attorney-client relationship with any of you. So there. Okay. So back to registering copyrights.
So guys, you're not getting real law. You're not getting a lawyer, and you're not getting a massage. So
you're getting a middle-aged writer who's, on her like fourth career. I just keep changing careers. What registration does for you is it allows you to claim statutory damages, which means the Copyright Act sets out some specific monetary damages for copyright infringement. So you don't have to go and actually prove your actual damages. Now, it's not a huge amount of money, so you may want to go ahead and prove actual damages, but it's much easier to go with statutory damages. You're not going to have discovery and evidentiary hearings and all kinds of stuff to get that settled. It also acts as what they call prima facie evidence, on its face evidence that you hold the copyright. So if you sue someone for copyright infringement and they're like, oh no, I have this copyright, and you can go into court and plop down, that certificate from the Copyright Office that shows that you filed for copyright, your copyright registration on this date and it was granted on this date. And it's not granted, it's not like they're going to approve it, it's just a processing thing. And you can go into court and say, see, and the judge is going to just take that on its face. You're not going to have to go through depositions and discovery. And the most important thing with legal stuff, and based on some of the other questions we talked about, we'll get into this some more, is you want to try to figure out ways to settle questions before they come up. So copyright registration is a really good way that in the event you have to sue someone or someone comes after you, you have a very clean and easy way to prove that it's your copyright and when it came into existence. And you can also go after the statutory damages. So that's pretty much with filing for copyright, but none of that's required. You don't have to do it unless you want to file copyright infringement action. And then you can go and register your copyright, before you go to the courthouse to file the lawsuit. So it's not that big of a deal.
All right, that's good to know because, in case anybody's thinking of stealing my stuff, I have, of course, registered every single book I've published, of course.
And you have really good attorneys.
Yeah, and I have certificates on the wall and everything to prove it. Yeah.
I know. For questions on it, a really good source of information is the U.S. Copyright Office, and it's copyright.gov on the internet. It's not legal advice, and they will tell you right out they're not giving you legal advice, but there's a lot of really good informational pamphlets about various issues associated with how you register, how you file an infringement claim, those kind of things. So it's a really good source of information if you've got questions.
All right, that's great to know. Joe, do you want to ask the next question?
Sure. This is one I've always sort of been concerned about. I've never really acted on it yet. A lot of authors put together an LLC and operate under that, and others, like me currently, just operate under their own name. What are the risks of just using your name to run your business versus the benefits, say, of having an LLC?
People really misunderstand the nature of having a corporation when it provides you. A lot of people, and I run into lawyers who think this, who should know better. They think that if you've got this corporate entity, it's like putting on a bulletproof vest or magical armor or something, and you can't ever get sued. Or there's certain instances where you want to protect your personal assets from business things, but for instance, like you build snowboards or skateboards or something, yeah, you're going to want to have a corporate entity, and you're going to want to keep your corporate assets and your personal assets very separate from each other in case someone gets injured and tries to sue the company. For authors, I don't think it's a huge issue. The LLC isn't going to really provide you massive amounts of protection because, one, you don't have a lot of business assets. I suppose you can say that the book, the intellectual property, I guess you could convey it to your LLC and protect it that way. But here's the thing: what you're going to get sued for as a lawyer or an author, sorry, forgot which hat I'm wearing. You're going to get sued for copyright infringement. You're going to get sued for defamation. You're going to get sued for, if you're writing, for instance, a nonfiction book and you advise people to do something that's horrendously dangerous or poisonous or whatever, you could conceivably get sued for that. You're not going to get sued for product liability. You know, someone isn't going to say, I got a paper cut on your book and it gave me gangrene and I had to have the, you know, entire right half of my body amputated. I mean, that's, yeah, I guess they could say that, but, you know, I don't think that's something anyone really needs to worry about. So the LLC, there is some liability protection, and again, this is why we always say, lawyers always say, I'm not giving you legal advice, you need to talk to a lawyer, because every specific situation is different. And depending on how your business is structured, it may make a lot of sense for you to have one from a liability perspective. But the really important reason, I think, for authors to look at corporate entities is financial. And I don't have an LLC. I'm just Laura Kirwan, you know, doing business as Burnt Barn Press when I have my publisher hat on, sole proprietorship. At the point where I'm actually maybe making some money, I'll look at doing an LLC, but it's going to be something that I do not because I want to protect myself from liability, but because I want the financial benefits of it. You're taxed differently depending on how your financial goals and how much money you're making. That may very much make sense for you to set something up. There's also the issue of, for instance, say you're trying to buy a house and you need to prove income. Well, if your publishing imprint is set up as an LLC and that LLC pays you a salary, then you can prove your income. You know, you've got things like that. So, but it's all going to depend. It's really more of a financial decision. And so when I get to the point where I'm making more money, I'll talk to an attorney, but I'm probably going to talk to my accountant first. And it's going to be a kind of a financial decision on which is the best way to go. But I would say for the most part, most authors are fine operating as sole proprietorships. And the liability, like I said, it's people think, again, they think that this corporate thing is like this, you know, armor and you're shielded. And honestly, it's really easy. It's what I call it piercing the corporate veil. It's actually a pretty easy thing to do to get after the individuals behind it because, you know, I mean, when push comes to shove, Joseph Lalo LLC did not write that book. Joseph Lalo did. So they're going to come after you anyway. So sorry, I thought I had turned off this. I'm having this like close up. Yeah. I thought I had it shut off. I don't know why the hell it's still doing it. But yeah, so it's more financial than for liability protection for us, I think.
Okay.
All right. Well, shall I jump in with the next question?
Yeah, sure.
I think one thing a lot of authors are going to be wondering about is we hear about these draconian contracts that come down from traditional publishers and even small presses. Let's say you get the chance to maybe with one series go with a traditional publisher, but maybe you want to continue self-publishing on the side, or just you decide to take a contract in general. What are some of the things that authors should look out for?
I will tell you, just to start out, I have a pretty serious bias against going with traditional publishing. And that's just because I've seen the things that they put in their contracts, and I refuse to give over control of my work. However, that doesn't mean that if an offer came along, I wouldn't take it if it was good. But here's the things that you really need to look out for. First thing is the term. How long are they going to lock you in for? Most of the big house contracts all of them, I think, are 70, life of copyright, 70 years plus, for life plus 70 years. Now, there's a thing in the Copyright Act that will allow you to reclaim your rights after 35 years. But wow, that's a heck of a long time if you decide you're not happy with the publisher and you want your backlist back. You know, you gotta wait 35 years. So you want to look at the term. Increasingly, I think you're going to see publishers beginning to realize that they can't get away with life of copyright terms anymore. Like, for instance, I know Amazon, through its publishing imprints, they have a set term, and I don't want to tell you how much it is. It's like 5 years, 7 years, 3 years, something like that. But it's a very reasonable amount of time that your rights go to them, and then they revert back to you. So you want to try, if you can try to limit that term, do it. The bigger houses, though, good luck. The other thing you're going to want to watch out for, and you said, what if you want to write another series while you're, doing this, is the non-compete clauses. And there's a lot of talk going on the various, websites and blogs and about how onerous these provisions are. And basically, the non-compete clause will say something effective. You can't write a similar type book while you're under contract. And if you're under contract for the rest of your life, and you're an urban fantasy author and they don't want you to write any more urban fantasy series, well, that's a little bit of a problem. So those are a big thing. You need to look at those and you need to understand what they say. And at this point, they are tilted so far in favor of the publishers. They're draconian was the word you used, and yeah, they really are. But you can't go to court and say, well, they were mean, because you signed it. So let's see, there's that one. How are you going to get paid? Like, for instance, okay, now if you're a blockbuster author and you're making 7-figure advances, well, a lot of times those authors, they're not expected to pay out their advance. They kind of get paid these big fat lump sums at the beginning. But how is that going to work? How royalties? Okay, so an advance is basically a lump sum upfront payment of future royalties. So how are you going to earn out those royalties? Are you going to have to refund the advance if you don't earn out the advance? There's also something called I think it's an earn-out clause that I've heard about, and basically it says you don't get to collect royalties on the future books under the contract until you've earned out the advance on the first one. So, it can be a long time before you make any money over and above that advance you get. Also, when is the advance going to get paid out? Is it going to be, usually it's almost never one lump sum in the front. It's usually, I think, in halves or thirds or whatever. But they've been sneaking all kinds of crazy stuff in there, too. The longer you can hold on to that money as a publisher, the more interest you can make off it. So you can promise it, and but if you can hang on to it for another year, well, that's another year's interest you've made off that. Multiply that times thousands of authors, and it's a lot of, it's a fairly decent chunk of change for them. So those are the big ones that are kind of causing all the issues. Another one, I guess, is what rights are you giving away? Because the issue becomes, if you, there's a lot of contracts out there now for people who went under contract before ebooks came out, and they'll have very general clauses about, in print or any other technologies that may come along, blah, 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 blah. Does that cover it? Now, most of them, any contract now is going to mention digital and print rights, but film rights, merchandising rights, what's covered? You need to really watch out for that. Make sure you understand that. You need there was another one I'm thinking of, and it just fell out of my head. Basically, though, you need to understand what it is you're giving away. What rights are you giving away? For how long are you giving those rights away? How are you going to get paid for those rights? And this is it. This is a really important one. Out of print. How do you get those rights reverted back to you? A lot of contracts they'll say, well, the rights come back to you once the book goes out of print. What does that mean in the digital age when a book can last forever? What does that mean? Are you out of print when you're no longer listed in their catalog? Are you out of print when you haven't sold X number of books in a certain amount of time? What happens if you've got a digital catalog and you sell one book every, 8 months? Someone stumbles across you on Amazon. Does that mean you don't get your rights back? Even though the company is doing absolutely nothing to market it or push it or do anything to, make money off of that particular asset. I would, and a lot of people, the other problem with this, with the big publishing contracts, is a lot of people go, oh, well, I'm going to have my agent advise me. Do not have an agent advise you on this unless that agent is also a practicing licensed attorney, experienced in contracts. Because an agent, I see this all the time. I don't know how they don't get prosecuted for unauthorized practice of law, frankly, some of them. They don't, they're holding themselves out as, we perform a lawyer-like function. Well, there's no such thing as a lawyer-like function. That would be called the unauthorized practice of law. And the other thing, this is something that's not in the contract, but something that I think people should watch out for is some contracts will have bankruptcy clauses. They'll say if the publisher goes bankrupt, the rights will automatically revert to you. No, they really won't. What happens is if you try to do it, if you're the publisher and the publisher is about to go into bankruptcy and they give all the contracts, revert all the rights back to their authors, and then they file bankruptcy the next week, the bankruptcy court's going to look at that and say that was an unlawful distribution of property of the bankruptcy estate, and they'll just negate them. And so you end up, your rights end up as part of the bankruptcy estate, and God knows when you get them back. Any royalties you're due, you become an unsecured creditor, so you're at the bottom of the pile. So yeah, it's the contracts, they don't protect you from bankruptcy. That's a real issue, and that's something I think is going to get to be a bigger and bigger and bigger problem as the industry continues to contract and change. And I mean, at this point, we had the big six, now we have the big five, and so they're going to continue to contract and merge. The smart ones will do that. The smart ones will adapt and merge and figure out how to survive. The stupid ones will continue doing what they're doing and go bankrupt. And your rights are going to get stuck. So yeah, I would tread very, very, very carefully on doing a traditional deal. Make sure that you understand exactly what it is you're agreeing to, and that you can live with those terms. Don't sign it and just because your agent says, oh, this is a great contract, because your agent has an inherent conflict of interest. And so anyway, sorry, I can go on about this forever, and I know you have other questions to ask me, but tread carefully. That's what I would say.
It's really great advice. I mean, especially right now as we're recording this, there's this big, I don't want to curse on here, but the whole Laura's Cave thing.
Oh, yeah.
And people are just wondering when they're going to get paid or how they can get their rights back, and it just sounds horrible to.
Yeah, and that's not the only one. There were other ones. Dorchester, I think, was one that had all kinds of problems, and I hear horror stories all the time about. Right now it's smaller and some medium presses, but it's only a matter of time till the big houses begin to get. I mean, they're already, like I said, we have Penguin Random House now instead of two separate publishers, and I don't think they got together just because they really were into each other. I think there were very definite financial reasons for that, and if they hadn't, one of those companies would have found themselves in trouble down the road. I mean, I don't know for sure, but you don't merge unless you feel strategically like you need to. So anyway, so ask me another questions, or I'll go on about this forever.
No, that's great to know. Joe, do you want to go in with the next question?
Yeah, we were talking about contracts, and let's say you have a contract with a business partner, and they are starting to show signs of not living up to their side of some of the minor parts of the contract. I'll give a specific example that is in no way related to me at all. Let's say that you sold the translation rights to Bulgaria, and they agreed to give sales reporting once every 6 months, and 7 months go by and they haven't given you any sales reporting. At what point do you start getting on their case and saying that they're not fulfilling their side of the contract versus how much leeway can you give them?
Oh boy, that's one of the classic sort of it depends. I always joke that my favorite answer to my clients, they used to joke about the fact that I was going to get sued for trademark infringement from a certain adult undergarment manufacturer, because I would always say, well, it depends. I don't know, it depends. Here's the thing with a contract. People think a lot of times that they're sort of like carved in stone. But and this is me kind of taking a step back to explain kind of contracts generally, and then I'll get in more to the question. The contract is basically, what it basically is the story of your deal. It's a narrative description of what each party's understandings are about what they agree to do or give and what they expect to get back in return. So contracts they're negotiable. They can be amended. It's the party's memorialization of the agreement. So a lot, and how you're going to act on it is going to depend. One, on how the contract itself is worded, and I'll get back to that in a second. Two, it's going to depend on the relationship you have. I mean, if you want a relationship with a business partner to go chilly and south really, really quickly, go legal immediately and don't call them and try to work it out. So again, it depends. I mean, with some people, some business partners, that's the only thing you can do. You just have to hold their feet to the fire immediately, because you know that trying to be friendly or nice or work it out is you're just going to get kicked in the teeth. It's not going to get you where you need to go. So yeah, and it depends on what the relative bargaining power is. It depends on what's at stake. Here's the thing: when I talk about the contract language, there's a concept of the idea of waiver, and sometimes you'll see this in contracts. I did a lot of real estate. I know about intellectual property. What I've had to learn for doing this, but my basic area was government procurement, and I did a lot of real estate. And in real estate, we did lending specifically. We did a lot of affordable housing lending. And so in lending contracts, for instance, you'll have a provision that very clearly states that, like in a promissory note, that failure to strictly enforce the terms of the note or the loan agreement do not waive the lender's rights to come after you for it. So if as a lender you say, you know what, I'm going to cut you some slack and let you be late for a few months and not charge you late fees and interest, as I know things are tough, you can do that. But also at the fourth month, if they continue to jerk you around, you can accelerate the loan and charge them interest for all those past due payments and late fees. And so you don't most of the time under a contract, you do not waive your rights to enforcement by not enforcing them right away. It's not like, oh well, you weren't a complete jackass to me right out of the gate, so you can't do it now. So you do have some wiggle room there, and again, it depends on the relationship. I mean, if you have a good working relationship with these people otherwise, and you start out with a friendly phone call. If that doesn't get you anywhere, you start with a friendly email. If that doesn't get you anywhere, you write a friendly but maybe a little bit more formal letter. You just decide on how fast you want to go nuclear, basically. But the first step, like you said, with legal action, the first step before any lawyer will file a lawsuit on anything like this is they'll want to write what we affectionately call nasty grams. And that's a letter on legal letterhead saying, you, under the terms of your contract, my client informs me that you haven't blah, 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 blah. You have 30 days to come into compliance or we will be forced to pursue all appropriate legal action. Govern yourself accordingly, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, again, that one it just depends, and it depends on how important the thing is. I mean, if they're starting to jerk you around on reporting, and I would say nicely remind them, make it clear that you're not, that you are paying attention and you have noticed that this is a problem, but you really have to tread carefully depending on what you want that relationship to be, and if you want it to continue to be cordial, or if you're at a point where the only thing that's going to get their attention is a bucket of cold water and a slap in the face. I mean, so yeah, so that's kind of your classic it depends.
All right, that makes sense.
Okay.
All right, are you okay staying a little past 7 since we've
yeah.
Start? All right, I have a couple more questions I'd love to ask. I think this is really valuable information. I do still want to, get to your book and the marketing stuff too. So, my next question, I guess it's kind of related to that, maybe to Bulgaria, is well, every couple of months, I'll get an email from some such and such country. We're interested in buying the foreign rights to your book and printing them here. And so far, I've just kind of been like, well, I'll email you if I ever get an agent that handles that stuff. But I have a feeling I'm leaving money on the table because So what's the best way? Do you need to get an agent to do foreign rights, or should you just get an IP lawyer to look at contracts?
Here's what you need an agent for with foreign rights is if you are interested in pursuing it, but you don't know the companies, you don't know, and you want someone who's going to go out there and pitch you to those companies. And an agent who's experienced in foreign rights and who knows the people and has the relationships and knows the players, that's a really good time to use an agent because they're going to do that legwork for you, theoretically. You want to get a good agent because there's plenty of agents that won't do crap for you, but you get a good one and they'll do that legwork. But if they've approached you and it's not an issue of searching them out, go to an IP attorney. There's absolutely no reason why you need an agent for that, because at that point, I mean, what the agent brings to you, the thing that makes it worth giving the agent, basically, when you think about this, is basically giving the agent a 15% equity stake in your work, depending on the agency contract, because those can go on for a long time too, for life of copyright. what you're paying them for is for them to go out and find opportunities for you. But if the opportunities come knocking, then it's just a matter of approving the contract. And any experienced IP attorney can, can walk you through that, because it's not going to be terrifically complicated. It's going to be the same issues. How long is the term for? How are you going to get paid? What are their rights to use the work? What do you have any? How does the process work to get your rights back if they go out of print? All those things. It's the exact same passel of issues you're going to have with a regular publishing contract. Any IP attorney can handle that. And the nice thing with the IP attorney is you pay them by the hour. I know a lot of people, they blanch like, oh, I don't want to pay for an attorney, but they'll pay an agent, 15% of their action for the next 50 years, but they won't drop a few $100 on a lawyer. So yeah, I think you are leaving money on the table, and you should find an attorney and start moving on those things. Because boy, if they're coming to you, then a lot of the hard work's already been done. It's just a matter of figuring out the terms. So yeah.
All right, that's definitely good to know. And would you just kind of go back and forth with the interested party and say send a contract, and then at that point take the contract?
Yeah, I would say, oh yeah, okay, well send us, send me a proposal. Tell me what your terms are, or send me your contract or whatever, and I'll review it with my attorney. And any reputable house is going to go, oh, okay, who do we send it to? Do you want us to send it directly to your attorney? But the ones that are like, what attorney? Well, we can just do this on a handshake. Run away. Just don't. Anyone in this stuff who says, can't we just do this on a friendly handshake basis? Go. On this kind of stuff, just go. So yeah, I think the easiest way is just to say thanks for your interest, and why don't you send me a term sheet or specific, what are you looking for in a deal, and I'll run it by my attorney, or send us your contract, and we'll review it and get back to you. And then you just go back, and then you just hand it over to the attorney and let the attorney negotiate it. And basically they'll talk to the company's attorney, and I'm sure there's got to be people that are specifically experienced in these sort of, it may not be the local attorney, but I'm sure they can find someone to help them, kind of advise them on it. But yeah, it's not that complicated. Anyone who's done any kind of international business can probably handle it. So, but IP, an IP attorney is a good way to go.
All right. Well, if I make one of those deals, I will take you out to lunch. All right. Joe, did you have any more questions?
Yeah, just one. It's my last one. It's also sort of related to that. Let's say, for example, again, Bulgaria wants your stuff. And,
Bulgaria, they are. What's going on over there?
Bulgarians.
They're the new Nigeria.
And but let's say they don't offer you a contract. They let you write your own contract, and you decide you're going to go to a lawyer. Imagine this thing sort of keeps happening. Starts to keep happening. Is a boilerplate where you just change the bits and pieces okay, or is it the sort of thing you should get a lawyer to do it every time?
No, here's the thing. Most lawyers live and die by their boilerplates. I always just joke about this, but it's very true. There has not been a wholly original contract written in this country since about 1750. I mean, honest to God, we all just keep plagiarizing each other. And I have pulled 18th century language out of more than a few contracts over the years. So yeah, no, boilerplates. I use in the government. I used them extensively. I mean, my job on a lot of things was I would annually approve a boilerplate form, and they would just use that, and then I would sign it. And if there was anything odd, so yeah, so get the attorney, work out a basic form contract that you're comfortable with, that has the terms and that's really great if you can do it, because then you have more control over the deal, because you're telling them how you want it to be, instead of the other way around. Figure out the terms you can live with, and yeah, go with it. But what I would tell you though is if the other side, if the deal's a little bit different from something, and there's something that you don't feel comfortable that you understand, call your attorney. If they propose changes that you're looking at and you're going, I don't know how this is going to affect things, and I don't know the legal significance of this, call your attorney. The most important thing that you can do is understand. Never sign something you don't understand. And so if there's going to be any changes, either that the facts seem a little different and you're not sure that you're on solid ground, call the attorney. If they want to change it, you call the attorney. But yeah, no, boilerplates are fine, and it's actually, and the funny thing with boilerplates is that's what you'll get with like the legacy traditional contracts, and they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, that's our standard form contract, it can't be changed. Well, bullshit, it can be changed. But yeah, no, you don't need to go reinvent the wheel every time, because I'll tell you, the lawyer won't. They'll just take that file out and cut and paste some stuff, and or cannibalize something from another deal, or cannibalize some other attorneys. I'd always save all the documents from opposing counsel on anything so I could cannibalize those. Like, ooh, that's a really good way to do it. But yeah, so and this is something that I was thinking about when because you guys had sent me some of these ideas for questions when I was thinking about them earlier. Is when hiring an attorney. People, needless to say, they get stressed about it. Attorneys are not cheap, and people get really stressed about the money. But there's a couple of things to think about. One, for using legal resources wisely and saving money. First of all, attorneys cost a whole lot less on the front end of a deal than the back end. That the couple $100, $1,500 you spend with a lawyer, a transactional attorney on the front end, getting the deal right in the first place, is going to be way, 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 way less expensive than if you have to go to court. Because then that's when you hear the horror stories about, my brother-in-law's divorce cost him $800,000 or something. That's where that comes in, because you have to respond to what the other person throws at you, and you're arguing everything, and it's unlike we're transactional, where the idea is let's put together the best deal we can to avoid having to go to court in the back end. So there's that. The other way you save money is by having very specific questions for the attorney, and which means you have, authors really have an obligation to understand, especially self-published authors, but this is for anybody, it's not just self-published, it's any authors, who really have an obligation to understand the business we're working in. Because, if you hand something over to the attorney and go, I got this, I don't know what it is, will you look at it and tell me what to do? That's going to cost you a whole lot more money than if you say, hey, I've got a question about paragraph 16, they want to add the following language, I'm not sure how that's going to affect the deal. This is a standard deal except for X, Y, and Z are current. These except for these different facts, this is pretty much our standard deal. The attorney can give you that answer really, really quick, and it's going to cost a whole lot less money. So knowledge, that's how you save money with lawyers, is ask them very specific questions. Don't just send them off on a fishing expedition, because they'll go, and not necessarily because they're trying to rip you off, but it's a CYA thing. I mean, if you asked me, when I was practicing, if you'd asked me a very specific question, I would give you a very specific answer. Based on the facts you have given me, the answer is X. But if you just ask a general, I'm going to go and try to figure out everything I can and spend a lot of time on it to cover my ass. You can't come back later and say, well, I got sued because she didn't tell me about this. I can say, yeah, I did. Or I can say, you didn't ask me about that. You asked me about this. So anyway, that's my dealing with lawyers tip.
Definitely, that's the good advice. Should save us some money down the road. My last question is just maybe you could really quickly address. This is not me, I could never imagine it, but a lot of people like to do the co-authoring thing, and I think you're also working on a project coming up soon. And just any advice to make sure you don't get in trouble, or to start out well, for stave off trouble ahead of time, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's funny, because the person I'm working with is an author named Suzanne Harden, and she's a former attorney as well. And so we just started throwing these emails back and forth, and we were all excited. And we got to about the fourth round of emails, and I thought, we really need to talk about a collaboration agreement. And then that email she sent me was, we really need to talk about a collaboration agreement, and here's, she had a worksheet she'd gotten from Romance Writers of America. So there's a lot of information out there. So we're working on that. We're putting a term sheet together. And before we start seriously writing, we will very definitely get that hammered out. But for collaboration agreement, co-writing, you need to understand before. It's like a marriage. You're going to be a lot more successful with it if you know how you're going to handle issues, if you've talked about your philosophy on money, if you know all this stuff. And also, it's how are you going to deal with it if the thing falls apart. It's much easier to talk about it now when you're friends than later when you're ready to kill each other. So and there's certain things too with co-writing that the law will infer if you don't set it down in writing otherwise. So the first thing you need to figure out is who's got what right does each person have in the project? Is it a 50-50 split? Is it something different? Suzanne and I are doing a straight 50-50 down the middle. But also, do those, that 50-50 interest, do those, that shared copyright, at death, do your rights revert to the other author, or do they go to your heirs? How long is that going to last for? Is it for the life of the copyright? Other things you need to think about is what happens, and this is something Suzanne and I haven't talked about yet, but what happens if one of you dies during the writing process? Do you, the surviving author, get to inherit the project as whole, or are they going to have to write it in a way that makes the heirs happy? What happens if, we get to a point where either we just can't stand each other, or one of us just doesn't have, it's just not something we really care about anymore, and we just want to get out of the project. How do you buy that out? How do you do that? We're talking about a mechanism, a formula of how to value what that right is worth, so the other author can purchase the other author's interests. So, for instance, I get all excited to do this, and Suzanne's just like, I don't care about this anymore. I can buy the story, the copyright, I can buy the characters, I can buy the setting, I can buy all of that from her. What are some other things we talked about? How are you going to list the names? How are you going to do credit? And with us, it was really simple. Same font size, alphabetical order. That resolves a lot of problems. How are you going to, who makes the call as the final editorial call, the final cover approval? How are you going to handle that? We said that we were going to make this a true 50-50 collaboration, and if we cannot work it out, if we cannot come to an agreement, and if it gets to a point where one party has to tell the other party what to do, we're walking away, because it won't be fun anymore. It won't be any fun. So you got to figure that kind of stuff out. Suzanne had a really brilliant idea, to keep egos out of it. So we live in 2 separate states. She said, let's set it up so in the event we have a conflict, we have to do binding arbitration in a 3rd state. So that way, it's a pain in the ass for both of us to do it, and it's going to keep our egos in check. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff you really need to understand. It's like doing a prenuptial agreement. You got to understand what it is you're signing up to do, how you're going to conduct that relationship, and what's going to happen if it turns sour. Basically who gets the money, who gets custody of the children, the intellectual property. There's a lot of stuff though online. I think if you went on and just Googled co-author agreement how to, boom, you'll get a ton of stuff. Like I said, her thing was from Romance Writers of America. I'm sure like I said, I'm sure there's tons of stuff out there, but you really do need to get all that hammered out ahead of time and get it signed. Again, hope for the best, plan for the worst. So.
All right. Well, we're going to hope that neither of you die during your project, and that
yeah, I hope so.
everything works out pretty well there. And we really appreciate you.
We're young, but we're not that old, so.
That's good to know. They're probably safe then. But we appreciate you answering all the legal questions. I think we just got a couple $100 worth of free legal advice. So we hope that our listeners.
I did not provide you with legal advice.
Legal information that is in no way binding or contractual obligation.
Attorney-client relationship between us. So, if I can be compelled to testify against you, just know that. I can't keep your secrets. All right. So
we better move on to marketing before we get ourselves in trouble here, Joe. You want to take the ball on that one?
This is the marketing podcast. So I think one thing that you've done that I haven't done, and I don't think Lindsay has either, is Kindle Select. So I just want to know generally, how do you feel about the decision to go with Kindle Select, and what's it done for you?
I feel really good about it. And here's the thing. Hopefully I'm not going to step on your toes on this, but I keep hearing the phrase, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." Oh, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But here's the thing. They're not eggs, okay? I mean, that don't put all your eggs in one basket makes sense if you've got something that's fragile, that will be broken, and that opportunity will be lost. So, for instance, if you don't put all your eggs in one basket between have self-published, have hybrid, have traditional. That's good advice, because those those stories that other people own, those are eggs, and they can smash them, and you'll be very sorry. But self-published, they're not eggs; they're stones, basically. So, if your basket, the bottom falls out of your basket, well, you pick your stones up. You might have to rinse them off, and you find a new basket and put them in. It's not, it's not a catastrophe. So I went in deciding that I was going to give it a try, and I thought there's some real benefits to it, and I'm also thinking it's not going to be a permanent thing. It's not like Jeff Bezos is my very BFF, very best friend, and I love him so much, and he's my bestest friend, and all my books will go to him. I mean, it's a strategic decision on how to build a readership. And KDP Select provides some certain things. One, when I first started, it was before Kindle Unlimited came out, so I was interested in seeing how the Kindle owners lending library was going to work, if that was going to provide any significant income. Now, the book's only been out since the beginning of April, so I've only got just over 6 months. Yeah, 6 months of data. Am I 6 months? Yeah, 6 months. So take all of this with a huge grain of salt. The jury's definitely out on KU and Kindle, and I don't even know if they do Kindle owners lending library anymore. But the jury's still out on that. I just don't have enough sales to determine if that's worth it. A lot of people say that they make more money off of that than they do with the other platforms. I also am not kind of all that thrilled with the other platforms. Barnes & Noble at the time had a provision in the Nook contract that I just would not, I couldn't live with. They had a potential rights grab built in. It was either poor drafting, although I think Barnes & Noble can probably afford to hire really good attorneys, and they have since changed it. They've taken out the offending language. But they're also had some problems with them not paying people. That was a recent thing. That was a computer glitch probably, but I'm not loving their long-term financial prospects, and that's just my opinion. Please don't sue me, Barnes & Noble. And like Google Play, there's problems there where they'll just unilaterally change your prices on you, which can cause problems. Kobo, Smashwords, there's not enough sales. At this point, I mean, it really is a problem. I mean, I don't like a world where Amazon has all the power, but unfortunately, they're the major player right now. And my interests are aligned with theirs, so I feel comfortable doing it with them right now. It's also the fact that I can just take the books and walk away if it gets bad. So there's that they have some of the overwhelming market share. They also have what I have found really helpful, and I haven't started. You can do a free promotion every quarter or what they call the countdown deal. And the countdown deal, you can either just do a sale, and you can take it all the way down to 99 cents and still get the 70% revenue cut, which is really nice. You don't lose the 70%. But you can also set it up so it it starts out it's 99 cents for 2 days, and it goes up to $1.99. And so buy now in 12 more hours the price goes up $1. I haven't done that. I've just done a flat out sale. But it's really nice because it puts you not only does the price come down, but it puts you in a smaller pool. You're in that countdown deal pool for like a week. I actually have gotten my sales spikes have all been during countdown deals. And I feel like I've done pretty well. I mean, the book's been out for 6 months. I've sold around 160 copies now. I've got 15 reviews. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely not up there with the people who are like, I put my book out and I sold 20,000 copies in the first 5 minutes. Many of those people, I think, are not being completely truthful. That's just my opinion on that. It's for me, it's been in like a nice steady way. Those deals are really helpful. Now, when I get to a point when I have enough books out and I can look at doing like a perma-free thing, at that point, that's when I'll expand it out. I know a lot of people say, well, it should be anywhere where your readers might be, but at this point I don't have any readers. I don't have very many readers. So KDP for me, starting out as a brand new author, has been a really good way for me to take advantage of their benefits to build that sort of core readership, and then try to each promotion I've done, each sale's been to try to make that circle a little wider. First it was get friends to buy it, then it was to get complete strangers to buy it, and so yeah, I've been really pleased with it. it's made it easier in terms for me in terms of being able to track my sales. It's just for starting out. It was just one place. It was a lot easier just to set up with one than try to keep track of multiple ones. But yeah, the plan is as the business grows to expand out, and I've always got my eyes open for, whoever the big, someone is out there formulating something that's going to kick Amazon's butt. It's just, it's just the nature of the beast. So yeah, I think it's a great way for new books to start out. It's a, but understand it's a strategic tool. It's not, and also it's, the beauty of it is if my relationship with them goes south, your KDP Select term is for 90 days, I think. And so, the longest I'm locked into them with is 90 days. And then I can just boogie and I can just take my books away. So, or spread them out a little more. So yeah, I definitely think there's a real benefit to it.
Good to know.
But I can't tell you about KU yet. I have no idea. I just don't have the numbers to have any idea.
I'm pretty sure Lending Library and KU are sort of like they're all on one line, at least on the report sheet here. So
yeah,
they
are.
Exist.
They are, and some people are doing great with it, but I'm just not. I got one book out, and I'm not doing serious promotional efforts because all the focus has been on just getting the books written, getting the inventory. I'm going to just kind of do the series, and if the world likes it, they like it. If they don't, well, then I've written 7 books, and I'll be really good at it by the time I write the series they do like. So, anyway.
Yeah, I would just say that I'm actually playing with a pen name, and I'm going to play with KDP Select and KU for the same reason. I think it's probably an advantage when you're starting out. I think they offer a lot of tools that you can play with to do sales.
Yeah.
And the whole eggs in the basket thing, I think until you're starting to look at this as, oh, I'm going to do this as my sole source of income and I need to make a living from it,
yeah,
that's when you get really nervous about just having Amazon as the only one giving you a paycheck, because people get terminated. It's not like a sure thing. And that's when it's real nice to know, oh, my Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Apple stuff could pay the bills, even if it's not as good as Amazon if some freak thing happened. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. You should definitely consider it as a strategic tool. It's not, you don't do it because Amazon's the only place to be and they're going to fix everything for you. I mean, it's a strategy, and you need to look at it strategically, and you need to keep that in mind. And if you're at a point where, like I said, where you're like you said, where your income is coming in and you're depending on those monthly payments, then by all means you need to start expanding out and looking at other sources of revenue. But I don't know that you should automatically I know a lot of people just automatically discount KDP Select, and they'll go eggs in basket, eggs in basket, and it's like, they're not eggs. So it's a different, you're not going to lose your rights. But yeah, I would love to see a serious competitor to Amazon come along, because it's, I mean, what they do is they do really well, but there's no one else who's doing it as well. But yeah, it's not a comfortable position to have your income dependent on one retailer. That is a very scary proposition. So, but at this point, of course, I'm not making any income, so it's not a problem.
Yeah, I think when Mark from Kobo was on the self-publishing roundtable, he was talking about, I think maybe people too sometimes have these unrealistic expectations about how much they can possibly make from Kobo or Apple, because they have such a smaller customer base than Amazon does. He pointed out that all of Canada is less than the population of California, so of course you're probably not going to have as many sales there, but just some food for thought.
But if you wanted that Canadian market, they're the place to be. So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, my idea is definitely I'm starting out with KDP and taking advantage of the things while my readership matures and my inventory line builds. Once I have, I mean, once I get to the point where if I've got 4 books out there, then I can do a promotion every quarter, or not every quarter. I can do a promotion every month of every quarter. Then it's totally time to start expanding out. And I may do it sooner. I haven't talked to Suzanne. I don't know how we're going to do the series of books we're working on, which involves lawyers and superheroes, by the way. I forgot to mention that. Lawyers representing superheroes, so that should be fun. But yeah, I don't know how we're going to do it. We haven't even talked about that yet. So, but it's right now it's a tool I'm very happy I've utilized.
That's good to know. I don't know if I'm gonna be messing with it at all myself anytime soon. We'll see. I gotta. I got a couple of books that are coming out in the future, and we'll see. But I've had a really good relationship with Smashwords, so
Hmm.
um, it's good to know that KDP treats people well, though, because at least if I decide to give it a shot, I'm not going to be terrified that it will screw me over in some way.
Yeah, I have heard horror stories about Amazon, but I've had really good dealings with them. And granted, I haven't had that many dealings, but I've heard enough stories. And right now, like, everyone's like, oh, well, someday Amazon might do this. And it's like, yeah, they might, but they're not doing it now. And right now, my interests are firmly aligned with theirs, and that won't always be the case. I mean, it's just that's part of, I think, the nature of this is you gotta keep up to date on other options, and you gotta be adaptable, and you gotta be nimble, and you gotta be ready to bolt if you need to. So yeah, like I said, I'm not thrilled with the idea of having one retailer over the long haul, but for right now, it's a benefit.
All right, well, I was kind of curious. You mentioned in your introduction that your hero in your urban fantasy is about 50, and I think you say she's postmenopausal, like actually in the blurb.
Oh yeah, she's reached menopause. Yeah, and I remember because I showed you that blurb. You're like, oh my God, take that out, take that out. And my older friends were like, leave it in.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I would like to know. You're probably writing for a more specific niche. Not that you're not going to get readers from every age group, but do you play that up in your marketing? Is it an advantage or a disadvantage?
Absolutely. My target, I know exactly what my target demographic is, and it's women 45 and up. I mean, I did, and I'm not a math whiz by any means, so I may have gotten these numbers completely wrong. So, again, another grain of salt here. But I did the research, and I looked at demographics. I looked at women 45 to 64, because I figured that's the most likely demographic group. I figured out how many women there are in that demographic in the U.S. I looked at how many of them read, how many women prefer ebooks to regular books, because the vast majority of my sales are digital, and try to get a feel. And I figured out, and again, this is my shaky math, so I might be completely up in the night, but I figured out that in that pool of women in that age group who like to buy, who read fiction and buy books and like ebooks, I'm looking at about 9 million women. Okay, 9 million in the U.S. So, because women buy more books than men. I mean, it's, I've had people say, well, if you put words like menopausal on it, you're not going to be able to sell it to men. And I don't need to sell it to men. I mean, that sounds terrible, and I'm sorry, Joe, I don't mean to slam your entire gender, but honestly, at this point, I can sell it just to my target group and do pretty well. It's you don't need to sell. It's the days where you needed to sell, 500,000 books to be, to get any kind of, those days are gone. You can be really successful, and I mean, you can be really successful and sell, numbers that are not bestseller numbers, not even close to bestseller numbers. So it's made it really easy for marketing too. I mean, you did a post, Lindsay, on your blog about using Facebook promoted posts and whether it was worth it, and a lot of people were really negative, but I found it really helpful, and for a couple reasons. Since I know that target demographic, I was able to go and figure out where they do most of their social media activity, and the vast majority it's Facebook. For women in that age group, it's like 78% of them, Facebook is their primary social media platform. Way more than Twitter, way more than Google+. So I know if I want to go after them, Facebook is a way to go. And with the promoted posts, I was able to target it. I did a promoted post with the countdown deals. The first one I just did a general friends of friends, and I got an okay result, but not great. The second time I did women, 45 plus, in the U.S. and the UK, because I was doing sales in those two places, who read fiction and who like urban fantasy. And I could have drilled it down even tighter, but I went to that. And I got like, on the Facebook post, for that promoted post, I got, I think, 10 likes from people I had never heard of. I mean, I checked them as much as I could to determine if they were friends of friends. No connections, women all over the country. I got a couple of comments to it. I got one super fan out of it who gave me my first Goodreads review, a 5-star Goodreads review, and she comments. She likes all my Facebook posts, all my author posts. She comments on everything. She actually turned out to be one of my beta readers. So it's having that writing to that community, yeah, I know a lot of people are like, oh, I want my book to appeal to everybody, and yeah, I'd like it too, but I know those are my readers, those are my people, that women in that age group, and I'm getting a great response from them. It's interesting because I'm getting response from women who don't normally read. A couple of my readers are like, I didn't think I'd want to read a book about witches. I don't care about that stuff, but they love the book because it also deals with, being that sandwich generation, having to deal with, take care of aging parents, and the character has a very strained relationship with her father, and how you kind of rebuild that stuff, and she's trying to rebuild a relationship with her brother, and come to terms with, her failure to have a kid, and and she's dealing with all these like rogue maternal instincts that she just doesn't know what to do with, and so yeah, a lot of people are really, the whole family aspect seems to appeal to them quite a bit. So yeah, I knew who my market was going to be, and that's and a lot of people are going, wow, we just love having a middle-aged heroine. Some people are like, oh my god, I think it's so great that she's she's got all the same issues I have. And a lot of these are the women who really were going after things like the Hunger Games and stuff, and the belief was they only wanted to read about teenagers, but what they wanted were strong women, and most of the women I know my age are, they're badass warrior queens, they're not these kind of wimpy things that the culture, the entertainment culture would have you believe. We do care about more than our husband leaving us for a trophy wife, and helping our daughter plan her wedding. So many of the books written to women in my age group are just, they're just ridiculous. So anyway, sorry, that was a very long answer to your question.
No, I think that's great that you're positioning yourself that way, and I'm going to be interested to kind of watch and see where your series goes from that. And I've gotten emails too. My characters are usually in their 30s or 40s, and just like, yay, it's not another 18-year-old orphan boy, and especially in high fantasy, that's very common. So it'll be interesting to. I definitely look forward to watching your series as it progresses. Joe, did you have any more questions on marketing?
I didn't have any more questions on marketing, but I was sitting here as I'm listening to the characters and the niches and stuff and I'm sort of like auditing my stuff. Like, hold on, I don't have an 18-year-old orphan boy. Okay, check. Like, I have strong female characters. Excellent. We're doing that too. It turns out, by the way, most of my readership is female too. Like, the split is. I met 4 fans at New York Comic Con this weekend, and all 4 were girls. And 2 were much younger than me, and the others were my age, though. So there you go.
Was it cool to have groupies?
It was cool. It was cool. Last year I had a fan who was very, very excited, like I was a superstar, and this time it was just, oh cool, I know you, whatever. But still, it's crazy meeting somebody face to face, and like they care who I am. I have a hard time getting the people in my house to care who I am. I had cats. They don't care who I am. But, yeah, so it was
You're the
cool.
man who runs the can opener.
Exactly. So I was able to give a book away, and I could get a picture taken. It was neat. So, yeah. Even for a certain niche isn't a problem. I didn't aim for niches. I just ended up landing in them, which is nice.
Well, and that's kind of with me. I mean, I didn't plan saying I'm going to go after middle age. Well, I mean, I wrote the book that resonated with me, and I knew I wanted to write about someone my own age, and I tell Steph, write what you know, and I just thought, I want to read women my age having adventures. I'm in an age where, we're supposed to we're supposed to be fussing over hot flashes all the time and worrying about wrinkles. And if you look at fiction, it's, we're supposed to either be recovering from our husband leaving us for his trophy wife and wanting revenge, or we're helping our daughter plan her wedding and dealing with empty nest syndrome, or we're having an affair with a younger man, or, and we're not, but it's not. It's all, like, if you look at women's fiction, because I'm in women's fiction fantasy, there's a much smaller pool on Amazon than, I'm also in the urban fantasy, sci-fi fantasy section. But if you look at how you drill down in that category, it's all about relationships. It's women's fiction. It's all about, husband and wives, sons and daughters, and it's not, and I'm like, no. I mean, but family's a huge component. It's this woman is really, she's reconnecting with her family, and she's developing this kind of weird blended family, some magical, some not. But yeah, it's all supposed to be about high relationships, and like I said, most of the women I know at this age are not, we're not elderly. Although you'd see some people who claim that, well, those are elderly women. No, they're really not. And you know, we're not done having adventures, and we're not. Yeah, we're dealing with all this other stuff, but we're still, you know, I know, like I said, it's most women I know at this age who successfully managed to get to this age they're badass. So, you know, myself included. So
I thought you brought up a really good point there that maybe we should kind of highlight, is that, you know, for fantasy and science fiction authors, we tend to go in and choose our categories for Kindle, and we're like, okay, this is like epic fantasy or urban fantasy. Both of those are hugely competitive. I think sci-fi's got more categories. They branch out a little more: military, sci-fi, space opera, and such. But you said women's fiction has a fantasy section?
It's literature and fiction, women's fiction, which I swore I wouldn't do. I'm like, I'm not writing, you know, chick lit. And I'm not writing romance. I mean, there is a romantic relationship, but boy, it's going to take them a long time to get their shit together. It's not, you know, they ended the first book going, oh my God, we're just too freaked out to even do this. But yeah, it's literature and fiction, women's fiction, and they have a category for fantasy. And it's there's a couple other people that are in there. It's interesting because you get a lot of the same authors you get in the urban fantasy, only you're not dealing with Jim Butcher and Kevin Hearn and some of those other people that are selling these, like, have massive sales and huge, you know, multi-book series and stuff. If you don't have to compete against Jim Butcher in a urban fantasy setting, that is a good thing. I mean, I love Jim Butcher, but God.
It's so rude when the author's got like 10 books in the top 20. You know, could you let some of the other people in there, maybe?
Yeah, there's like in the fantasy thing, there's is it Shannon Meyer, the one who writes the Riley Adamson? She's got a ton of books. She's in there. You know, it's those kind of things. And occasionally, yeah, you'll see women's fantasy, and then you'll get some like weird ass, crazy ass, weird erotica thing with billionaire werewolves and oh God. Anyway, but for the most part, yeah, it's just like the urban fantasy category. Only there's no boys. So.
Yeah. Another one people might not know about is if there's a pretty heavy romantic element, you can go down into the romance category, and there's also a fantasy and a science fiction under there. They're kind of competitive, but again, it's not quite as competitive as just general urban fantasy / paranormal and epic fantasy.
So urban fantasy, witches and wizards, and then I'm going to start adding characters so I can, you know, I've got a lot more ghosts in the second book, and we're going to have some gods make an appearance in the third book, and there's no category for leprechauns, although I've got a leprechaun in the second book, and there's a dragon's going to come in the third book. And so I'm just going to try to freight it up with as many supernatural characters as I can.
Why not?
So I can drill down to all those subcategories.
More the merrier.
Yeah, I remember somebody, I think on a podcast or interview with me, he was saying that he had an epic fantasy, but somehow he decided to put in just a slight Arthurian bend to it, like maybe that was the origins or something, and so he could specifically go into Arthurian legends in the Amazon, and there's so much less competitive that he did well, you know, just by being in there, and you know, it's so much easier to show up in the top 10 or top 20 there.
Huh! Maybe I have an idea for book 5. Yeah, it's you know, well, Suzanne and I, it's funny because our trilogy, it's going to be, or actually it's probably more than a trilogy now with the emails we keep sending each other with ideas. But yeah, we're, you know, it's fantasy superheroes. That's not a huge category, and so we're going to try to get the first book out on May 1st so we can try to, you know, kind of surf in the Avengers wake. You know? Hopefully we'll sell some books, but yeah, it's definitely, if you can find that, because you were the one, I think you were the one who said you need to find that smaller category when you went and you did the steampunk, because it's a much smaller category. It was one of your blog posts, I'm pretty sure, where you talked about that, and that's where I started looking around and thought, I'm not getting anywhere with, you know, urban fantasy and contemporary fantasy. I don't really know what the difference is between those anyway. And so yeah, I've been on the top 100 several times with the women's fiction, and haven't even, you know, been a blip on the radar on fantasy yet. So, yeah, it was a good move. So,
Yeah,
you know.
I'll try to do the notes for this post and put a link to the post I did a while back that I think you're referencing. It talks about how to get into categories that you can't specifically choose from the dashboard. There's a page on Amazon called like Kindle Select browsing categories, and you pick
Yeah,
keywords in order
yeah.
to get into some of the smaller categories. So I'll link
Yeah,
to that.
and I need to look at that because I need to learn that because the women's fiction, I was able to get into that through women's. I can't remember how, but it wasn't. I didn't have to do. It was one of those categories that you pick, you know, in the Kindle dashboard where you tell them which categories you want. I was able to get into it that way. I wanted to get into contemporary fantasy under literature and fiction, but I haven't been able to figure out how to get in there yet. And the women's fiction is just a better category for me right now, anyway. So.
Oh, one other one, just in case people want to try it, is there's a literature something action adventure, and that also has a fantasy subcategory under it. So
Oh.
maybe for the guys that want to be the action adventure type. I don't know, but there's all sorts of little ones to check out.
I also have a couple of gay characters in the second book, so I don't know. Maybe I can, slide it in under there somewhere. So, anyway.
All right. Well, I think I'm about done with questions. Anything else from Joe or?
Just two quick things, not really questions, just sort of observations. First off, you talk about it stinks when somebody's got multiple books in the top 10. I released a steampunk book last year, and then when I cracked the top 100, I was like, oh, I'm 95. Let me check who's at the top. And number 1, 2, 4, and 12 were Lindsay Broker. So I was like, yeah, she's beating me on that front.
Yeah. Well, it sucks when it's somebody else. When it's you, it's great.
Hey, 4 is not that bad, but when you have 10 in there, then you're just being greedy.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's just if you can, in fantasy, if you can not have to compete against Jim Butcher, because he's got he's got 12 Dresden Files now. I mean, it's just like the series that just keeps going on and on. I mean, they're good books, but boy, he's
Well, in epic fantasy, we're waiting for George R.R. Martin to.
Yeah. I was going to name him.
Go away. You've had your time in the limelight, right?
Yeah, it's like the top 5 books, or So, although of course, if he ever gets that other one released, then it'll all start all over again. So, but the rate he's going, he better write faster. He's not a young man, and he doesn't look very healthy.
That's true.
So.
The only other thing is
Go ahead.
You mentioned superheroes, and you mentioned a category for superheroes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I didn't find that when I wrote my superhero book.
It's in fantasy. It's under fantasy. I don't know if it's under fantasy, under urban. No, it's under fantasy. Yeah.
It's relatively new. I wanted to say that one just showed up this last year.
Yeah,
right,
and the interesting thing is if you look at the covers, because I was expecting to see lots of kind of graphic. Suzanne and I talked about the cover. I'm like, we need to spend some money and get a really cool comic book graphic kind of looking cover. There's not a lot of covers in there that are. I think people aren't thinking about positioning it. I think they're like, oh, that looks like a cool category, but they're not. It's like you go in fantasy and there's certain things that you see over and over again on the covers, and some of them are a little cliche, but most of them are really effective. And the superhero categories, boy, there's some really bad covers in there, but they're not things that are jumping out as superheroes. So, yeah, I think if you get a good story and put a good, comic booky looking cover on it, you're golden.
Make an adjustment. See if I can get in there. Although I'll tell you this, the book was also satire, and I guess they must release 4 satire books a year because I sold 12 copies and made it to number 8 on the top 10 for satire. So I don't know what that's all about.
Well, there's that guy.
Oh, go on.
I was going to say, Wayne Stimmett on the K-boards. He writes thrillers, but they all take place at sea or something, and he found that sea adventures category he's just dominating it now because it only had to be if you were in the top 100,000 in Amazon in sales ranking, you were good enough to get in the category because there's hardly anybody in there.
Yeah, and the women's fiction fantasy thing, I made it up to number 14 in Great Britain in the UK store on 8 sales. I mean, it's just number 14. All my friends are like, "Oh, you made it hitting the big time now," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, maybe not quite as impressive as it sounds." So.
All right. Well, shall we wrap up the show? Do you have a website you'd like to tell people to visit?
I do. My website is www.laurakerwan.com, and it is Kirwan. And the reason I'm enunciating it is because everybody gets it wrong. And yes, that is how you spell it. No, I'm not spelling it wrong, and if we were in Dublin, it would all make sense. So if you say it with an Irish accent, it makes perfect sense. But yeah, that's my website.
No, that's actually good that you enunciated it because most people don't. And I just say I'm fortunate people can Google whatever. If they're vaguely close, they'll find my website. But
and for me,
not everybody does.
There are so damn. I thought I had a really unique name, and there are Laura Kirwans by the bushel full. They're all over the damn place. I mean, I was amazed how many. If you Google Laura Kirwan, you hit like about 30 different women. So, all over the world.
All right, well, I guess that's about it. Everybody go check out Laura's book, especially if you like postmenopausal heroines.
She's not post. I think she's right in it.
Oh, she's just there. My bad.
I think Hot Flashes will be making a presentation at some point. It will become a part of the plot.
All right, well, check it out anyway, and we'll be watching you and hope to see you do well.
All right, thank you. Thanks for talking to me. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, signing off.
All right.